We welcome you back and welcome in two-time Fantasy Analyst of the Year, Jamey Eisenberg, to recap a pretty wild Week 11 in fantasy football. Some winners, some losers, and unfortunately, a ton of injuries that may affect fantasy managers going forward. But let's start off with the ground game. Two running backs left their respective games early due to injuries. Packers' Aaron Jones was carted off the field in a win over the Chargers with that knee injury. Seahawks lost Kenneth Walker in the first quarter with an oblique injury. These injuries, Jamey, likely set up A.J. Dillon and Zach Charbonnet with a larger share of touches going forward, right?
Absolutely, and keep in mind we have the Thanksgiving Day slate coming up on Thursday. Both these teams, Seattle and Green Bay, play on Thursday, so we're probably not going to see Aaron Jones. We're probably not going to see Kenneth Walker, and who knows how long these injuries are going to keep those guys out. So you're looking at two, running backs that have certainly been rostered, but they are available in some leagues. And I think, we've been saying this on our waiver wire shows for a while now. Pick up Zach Charbonnet just in case, because he had been getting a little bit more of a role, and you saw what his role was when Kenneth Walker went down against the Rams. And A.J. Dillon's kind of been in this spot before. Earlier in the season, we saw Aaron Jones go out with the hamstring injury and miss some time. He wasn't exactly great when he was in the starting role, but he certainly picked things up in a backup role. But anytime you're getting running backs in these type of offenses that are going to get the chance to carry the ball and touch the ball as much as these guys potentially can, make sure they're rostered, and they're definitely going to be, at worst case, flex options. I like Charbonnet more than Dillon moving forward. And if Ken Walker's out for any length of time, Charbonnet's going to be a number 2 running back in the majority of leagues.
Okay. Jamey, despite getting the win over their division foe, I have a very strong feeling it's going to be another week of a very unhappy Stefon Diggs out in Buffalo, as well as some unhappy fantasy managers. He finished the night with just 4 catches for 27 yards. How do we handle Diggs going forward in this offense?
Well, first we got to see what Trevon Diggs says, because that kind of dictates how things go for Stefon Diggs. Whatever his brother says on social media kind of is how the theme has been. But I think for Stefon Diggs, if you're a fantasy manager, you're trying to buy him low if there is a disgruntled Stefon Diggs fantasy manager, because it's been a couple games now of him having some down production. And certainly coming off this game where you see all the points being scored by the Bills, clearly it was in a lot of different ways. He's going to bounce back, and I think bounce back in a big way. They get Philadelphia in Week 12, and that secondary's been awful. Now, you got to keep in mind that the Bills still have their bye coming up, so you're going to lose him for a week. But if somebody is really upset with Stefon Diggs, and you can turn a player of significance into getting Stefon Diggs on your fantasy team, that's a move I'd absolutely make. I still think there's great games coming forward. We know the Bills are going to scrap to try to fight their way back into playoff contention, and I don't think Josh Allen is going away from Diggs completely. Even though Shakir had a big day today, the run game had a big day today, Josh Allen still needs Stefon Diggs in a major way. So if you can get him on your team for a rather inexpensive price, I would try to do so immediately.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, out in Jacksonville, the Jags coming off of a huge bounce-back win over the Titans, with Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley connecting 7 times for over 100 yards and meeting twice in the end zone. Can managers count on this connection out in Jacksonville going forward?
I really hope so. And this is a big game coming up in Week 12 as they take on the Texans, who are nipping at their heels, already beat them once this season. And this could be for the division. So I think this is a connection that they need to have established, and it was great to see it happen after some really down performances. Now, the best thing that came of it was we saw some red zone touchdowns. Certainly the first one was a beautiful throw from Trevor Lawrence to Ridley in the back corner of the left end zone. And that's something that's been missing for them all season long. Really, for Trevor Lawrence, his entire career, he's had some end zone woes. So hopefully this is something that they can build off of. It seems kind of funny that every time Zay Jones is active is when this Jaguars passing game opens up. And really, it's because they have a deep threat that can take some pressure off of Ridley. Not that Jones is a better receiver than either him or Christian Kirk, but it just changes the dynamic of how they call plays. And so I hope Jones stays healthy. I hope Ridley continues to be this type of guy. And most importantly, I hope Trevor Lawrence can finish the season strong, because he's been one of the bigger busts so far this year. He was a breakout candidate for me. I thought it was going to be a big season for him, building off of what he did last year. This was the guy that I was hoping to see all season long, using his legs, leaning on his pass catcher. So I hope we get a shootout next week between Lawrence and Stroud, and that Calvin Ridley has a big hand in it as well.
Okay, a guy that I was relying on at least this year was with New York Giants getting their 3rd win of the season, their 2nd of the year, coming against the Commanders, and then we got to see Saquon Barkley, the Saquon of, let's say, yesteryear, 14 carries for 83 yards to add to 4 receptions for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looking at what lies ahead for New York, and then we also have to consider their offensive struggles. There's no Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor's also out, Tommy DeVito under center. Do we believe Saquon can continue this type of production looking ahead?
Not to this level, but certainly the level that you're comfortable starting in. Because we were getting to a point where do we have to fear benching Saquon Barkley? And there's no way I'm doing that based on what we saw today, because he's facing not necessarily a similar opponent. I think the Patriots defense in Week 12 is going to be a little bit tougher test than the Commanders, because we know the Commanders have basically sold their 2 best players defensively when they made the trade of Sweat and Chase Young a couple weeks ago. But I think this Patriots run defense can certainly be exposed, and certainly they can get some work in the passing game. And the nice thing is, again, you mentioned the 2 touchdown passes, the 4 catches, DeVito leaning on Barkley in the passing game. We saw Darius Slayton get a little bit banged up in this game, so we'll see what the receiving core looks like coming out of this week. But obviously, if you're getting Saquon Barkley's involvement to this level, you're going to be thrilled about it. So he's not dead yet. It's not time to bury Saquon Barkley. And I don't think the Giants are going to shut him down, even though they should be looking ahead to the future, whether he's a part of that or not. But for the present, Saquon Barkley's still going to help a lot of fantasy managers, and I do love the setup for him against the Patriots in Week 12, especially after what we saw today.
Questions that still remain have yet to be answered, but we got a little time until we need to worry about that. Jamey, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you want more from Jamey, you're going to want to check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast. Jamey is joined by Heath Cummings, Dave Richard, and Adam Azer throughout the year, giving you all the advice you need to win your league. And it's available wherever you get your podcasts.